Old buildings drew Sean Crabbe like a bee to honey. The more neglected they were, the better he liked them. He couldn't really explain the appeal. It might have been something to do with the history that clung to the walls, the lives of long-dead people written in the dust, their stories forever trapped in cobwebs hanging from broken ceilings. That was why the old Nissan huts above Birchlow were one of his favourite places. He made his way there whenever he got the chance, bunking off from college or just disappearing on a weekend, when no one cared what he was up to. No one else ever went up to the old huts anymore. Not since the homeless man had died there, wrapped in a roll of plastic sheeting with empty cans scattered around him, a cold morning light glinting on the last drops of his beer as they dribbled across the floor. Sean had been there on that morning, had found the old derelict lying in his pool of special brew, and had walked away to try somewhere else. Next day, he'd watched from the hillside as the police and paramedics made their way to the site. He wondered why they'd sent an ambulance when any fool could see that the man was long since dead. Some folk said the place was cursed now, haunted by the ghost of the drunken vagrant. So that was why Sean was always on his own at the old huts. And it was just the way he liked it. There was one big building that was almost intact, with damp brick walls and corrugated iron sheets banging in the wind. Its purpose was a mystery to him, but he didn't really care. There were a few small rooms that might have been offices, a kitchen that still had a filthy sink in it, and a bigger space with a concrete floor and shelves along the walls like a workshop. He liked the narrow corridors best, the floorboards that had warped from the damp and seemed to move with him as he crossed from room to room, and the peeling paint of the doorways, where he could imagine anything waiting behind them to be found. In a way, whenever he pushed open one of those doors, he was entering a different world, stepping through into the past. He wondered if the past had been a better world than the one he was in right now. This morning, Sean's need to escape had been urgent. His B.Tech course at the Further Education College was turning out to be a waste of time, useless for his chances of finding the media career he dreamed of. The money he'd saved doing holiday jobs had long since run out. All those hours washing caravans and picking up rubbish hadn't kept him in course fees for long, and now he owed his parents for a loan to see him through. His girlfriend had dumped him weeks ago because she said he was mean, if he could call her a girlfriend. Most of the girls thought he was geeky. But if he was a geek, why wasn't he clever at passing exams and doing assignments? And to cap it all, a bunch of kids had mugged him last night outside a pub and nicked his phone. Lucky he didn't have his iPod with him at the time, but losing the Nokia was a real pain. His parents had shelled out for it, and he couldn't face telling them that he'd lost it. It was a pity there was no sun, though. A patch of thin lettuce-like wood had been exposed up there in the roof space, and when the sunlight shone through it cast shadows across the floor. Then Sean could pretend he was a child, avoiding the cracks on the pavement. Here he could step from light to light, avoiding the dark shadows as if they were traps, holes where evil lurked. Step from light to light and avoid the shadows. If only life was so easy. But there was no sun today. Just the rain clattering on the corrugated iron, blowing through the splintered windows, streaming down the walls. He was already wet when he arrived at the huts, and the chill made him shiver inside his parka. Mouldy, fusty, stale and mildewed. Those were the familiar smells of the hut. If the weather was warm, he could scent an underlying odour of oil or grease saturated into the concrete from whatever had gone on in here. That smell must have lasted decades, 50, 60 years. The buildings must be from about that time. They were so old-fashioned, so last century. It was hard for him to imagine what anyone might have done up here, stuck on an empty hillside in Derbyshire. Now and then he smoked a spliff up here at the hut, but he couldn't afford that now. Instead he plugged in the earphones of his iPod and selected some Coldplay. A feeling of peace settled over him as he listened to Chris Martin's plaintive vocals coming in on A Rush of Blood to the Head. He could forget everything else for a while once the music was playing. Today, though, Sean knew something was different. He tugged out the earphones and stayed completely still, his eyes tightly closed, his ears straining for a sound. The scurrying of a mouse under the floorboards, maybe, or a bird scratching a nest in the roof. But there was no sound. He squinted at the dust swirling slowly around him, disturbed only by the current of his own breath. The room looked the same as always. Nothing had been moved or disturbed since his last visit. It was always a worry that someone else would find the derelict buildings. Another vagrant sleeping rough. A couple of kids finding a place to have sex on.